So in the last video we took a little bit of a sidestep to talk about high level activities. Well, the reason why we did that is because we're now going to take advantage of activities, not necessarily in the way they were designed for, but certainly to achieve an end goal. Now if you remember in the previous video we were talking about how we can have user selected within a service request through the web portal. So we come back to editing our Active Directory service offerings. If you remember, we created these two query lookups for manager and PA, and we discovered the way that we can get around the restriction of not being able to identify them in Orchestrator was to set one as a related item and another one as a user selected item. And this is fine, and this will work fine for two query results to do with users. But it was a little bit messy, and if we now need to create a third, we're completely stuck because there is no way we can add a third. As I said in the previous video, we could create the relationship in the management pack, but then we'll have to keep editing the XML every single time we make a change to this request offering. So what we could do is if we come back to our original template, so the template we created way back at the beginning, and if we look under our activities, there's no surprise, there's our runbook activity we originally created. And if we have a look under runbook, we can see the create AD user runbook. Now if you remember in the video when I was talking about activities, I said there was one called a sequential activity, and a sequential activity in itself doesn't actually do anything. It allows us to nest other activities within it, and as soon as these are completed, then the sequential activity in itself becomes completed. So in theory, if we put no activities in here, when this activity comes to run, it will effectively just run straight through. So what's the point in doing that? Well, so we come back to our request offering. If we have a look at our config here and look at our options, you'll notice that in the drop down box here we have the ability to select objects that have been added as part of an activity. And a moment ago I just added a sequential activity, and so what we could do is we can actually assign the user to a sequential activity. Then what we could do in Orchestrator is pull up the relationships between activities, filter on the name that we give the activities, and in that way we could have as many user inputs as we want, and also it's named a little better. So let me go through and show you exactly how we achieve this. So we come back to our template. What we can do is create two sequential activities. And we call this sequential activity PA. And we move the runbook down because it needs to be below the activity. And we create another sequential activity and call this manager. And again, we need to bring the runbook below this activity. So we've got these two sequential activities, but because they've got no sub activities, they will immediately complete. So we now return back to our service offering. We come and configure our prompts. So we go to manager first and configure. What we can do under our options is add this as a related user, but we can relate it to the sequential activity manager. And we do the same for PA, we configure, and instead of using the alternative, we come up here and we add it to the sequential activity PA. Because we have embedded this information within those activities, we come over to Orchestrator, we can see we've got our initialized data, same as usual, and that is going to return our service request, same as usual. But what we're going to do now is get the relationship activity, and we're going to get all sequential activities from the service request that's been sent through. Then we're going to get the object, so we're going to get the sequential activities, and this is going to return all the sequential activities that are related to this service request. So this is going to return two objects for the get sequential activities, because there's two sequential activities within the service request. What we can do here is on the link is we can then exclude from the get sequential activities anything where the title does not equal manager. So this means that after this, though this is going to return two activities, it's only going to allow through the activities where it's equal to manager. Then here we're going to do exactly the same thing as we do before. We are going to take our sequential activity and we're going to look for any related domain users and groups. Here we're going to filter out any items that are related that do not equal configuration item. And here we're going to then pick up our manager object. So to get our PA, all we need to do is get relationship, take a second link, exclude where the title does not equal PA, and we get sequential activity. Our related class is going to be our Active Directory user. And of course, the GUID will be the parent activity. So now we want to get the configuration item of the user. Class is going to be user, and we want it when the object GUID is equal to the related GUID ID. And of course we can then get the Active Directory user and then create the end user. We've obviously branched off here, so what we would do is we would want to use a junction. So this basically means that when both these parallel paths have finished, we'll be able to create the user. Now this way, if we had another sequential activity that could then host another query lookup, we could have as many of these as we needed to, and that way our orchestrator is not restricted to the 1 or 2 query lookups that have limited us in the past. Now we can quickly run this. So we come over to the portal and create a new request. We create a new service request. We come over to Orchestrator. So we initialize data as always. We come through and we've got our service request. So this was our service request. We came up and we got all the activities related to sequential activities. So if we look at this get sequential activity relationship, you can see it's returned 2 objects. See, it's returned the 2 sequential objects, and that's because there was 2 in the activity. So we come down, we can see, yep, the get 2 activities. You can see it's returned 2 objects. So the first one would have been the one titled manager, and the second one would be the one titled PA. Okay. Then we've got our 2 relationships here. So we come down, we can find our manager, was the McAfee user. So the principle behind it, so we can see the principle behind it, and indeed how we could scale out this to having as many different kind of objects that need to be selected. So this is starting to get into some more advanced stuff, and will now allow us to build out the complexities needed in building our new Active Directory user.